It really is an honor to be with you and to be just representing on this particular issue. I have been teaching for 28 years, 20 of them in Loudon County, Virginia, and I have loved my career as a teacher, and I love my students. I knew when I became a teacher, the Lord made it very clear that my number one job was for these kids to know that they were loved unconditionally. And if they learn some history and government along the way, that's great. But the most important thing is for them to experience some kind of unconditional love, and that was going to be from me. That's my mission field. But I'm going to be honest with you, over the last 5 to 10 years, I have been very dismayed at the direction of public education. It started almost 10 years ago when we were told that we could not take points off if a student didn't put their name on their paper. We were not allowed to do that anymore because that's grading behavior, and we should not be grading students on their behavior. So now, instead of being able to hold them just a little bit of have a little bit of accountability, I have a corkboard in the back of my room full of no-name papers. Then we were told that we could no longer grade homework because it would not be equitable since not everybody has somebody at home to help them. Next came this notion that students should only be graded on their mastery of content. So now we have to grade homework and classwork, but those grades cannot count towards the student's final grade in the course. Only tests and quizzes and projects can count because those demonstrate mastery. Except if you know anything about kids, if they're not held accountable by a grade for that homework or classwork, guess what happens? They don't do it. Today, I am also required to allow students to retake any assessment if they get less than an A. And for the most part, they are allowed to turn in work late without any penalty. So in this decline of excellence, the county where I teach has voted to do away with class rank and valedictorians. They have also lowered the standards to our very elite academies of science. Last year was particularly eye-opening for me. I came back to teaching a subject that I had been away from for about 10 years, and this was supposed to be a class for the average student who may or may not go to college. And as I looked back at the materials that I had used 10 years ago to see, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, what could I use again? I was startled by the fact that my current students would not be able to do the work that I had given 10 years ago. It wasn't because it was outdated. It was because they wouldn't be capable of doing it. Half of my students were below grade level in reading. A third of them could not read above a 4th grade level. And these are kids who are 16 and 17-year-old juniors in high school. They can't do the work because they can't read. And it's a testimony to the fact that since failure is not an option, the system just keeps pushing kids along whether they actually show us mastery or not. And I paint this backdrop for you so that you understand that this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the level of erosion that is happening in our public schools in America. It's even deeper than just the academics. It's amidst this erosion that public school districts across the country are focused in on not solving the problems of failing academics, but on the indoctrination of our students, our kids, into very radical ideologies on race and on gender. Critical race theory is being pushed. It teaches students to judge one another based on the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. I have personally witnessed the damage that this has done to our student body culture. I have witnessed students excluding one another for their skin color. I have witnessed students saying, "You cannot be a part of this conversation because you're white." And that is heartbreaking. No child should be excluded because of the color of their skin. Even more alarming is the current gender ideology that's being pushed on all of our children. With the current gender ideology, students on demand can make whatever gender claim they wish, And according to the policy in my county, the way a student identifies must be validated. Teachers are required to call that student by whatever name and whatever pronouns they claim. But this entire notion of gender transition and fluidity is utterly confusing to both kids and adults. And I'm going to tell you a story that is absurd, and in the past I've had people laugh when they hear it because it's so absurd, but I'm going to ask you not to laugh and remember that this is a real human being, a student of mine who I loved. I had a young man one year, and he dressed very feminine. This was even before the whole transgender push. He dressed very feminine, wore a lot of very female-looking clothes, often wore makeup and nail polish, and he used to claim that he was a lesbian. And I would ask him, come on, how can you be a lesbian? And he would say, well, I am a girl trapped in a boy's body, and I'm attracted to girls, therefore I'm a lesbian. And this is a young man who desperately needed help. But under the current policy, no one can try to help. Instead, everyone has to validate this tortured logic. Not even the parents can question any of this, since they might be referred to Child Protective Services for not validating their child's gender claims. Both teachers and parents are told, if you do not engage in affirmative care regarding a child's gender claims, then that child is likely to commit suicide. And quite frankly, this is a terrifying manipulation and emotional blackmail. Our current county's policy also requires teachers to lie to parents about their child's social interactions in school, if that child is identifying as the opposite gender and the parents are not on board. So while in school, the child is going to go by one identity, and then at home and with all parent communications from school, they go by their true and given name and gender. And this is wrong on so many levels. First, it is forcing a wedge between a very sacred relationship between parent and child. And in addition, it forces these kids who are clearly struggling with so many other mental health issues to live a double life. And I know I'm not a psychologist, but even I can see that living a double life cannot be psychologically beneficial for these kids. As a teacher who loves my students and deals with them in truth and reality, these are really dangerous times, but I continue to stand for the truth because words have meaning. And if I am forced to refer to a student by a pronoun that is not in alignment with that gender's biological sex, I am conveying to that student that gender is fluid, and that is just not true. The best thing that we can do, the best way that we can show love and respect for others is to speak to them in language that is true and accurate and conversant with reality. And the reality is that every single one of us has a word stamped inside of us. And the abbreviated version of that word is either XX or XY. But if you take that abbreviation and you unravel it, you get the human DNA strand, which is over 3 billion letters long. And so I ask, how could we as human beings have the audacity to look at that word, the longest word known to humanity, and say, there's no meaning behind that word. There's no author behind that word. I get to define for myself what that word means. When we live like that, we are living in rebellion against who God designed us to be, and we are living a lie. And I am sorry, but I cannot lie to my students, and I cannot encourage them to live a lie. So that's why I've joined with 2 other teachers in our county to challenge this policy. And with the help of Alliance Defending Freedom and my attorney here this evening, we are standing for truth, because truth matters. As Martin Luther said, peace if possible, truth at all costs. And perhaps the foundational issue that we are facing in education today is that we have moved away from a culture of academic excellence to a culture of self-esteem and feelings. Every child's feeling must be validated, even if it's not an accurate feeling or perception. Thomas Sowell once said, one of the painful signs of dumbed-down education is how many people are unable to make a coherent argument. They can vent their emotions. They can question other people's motives. They can make bold assertions. They can repeat slogans. Anything except reason. We have basically done away with teaching our kids how to think and how to manage the stresses of life. We've done away with healthy competition in school, thinking this is going to be the answer to alleviate the stress and the anxieties and the struggles of the adolescent years. But the truth is, the adolescent years are a struggle in every generation, and we have a choice. We can teach our kids how to navigate that struggle and that stress and those anxieties well, or we can coddle them and their feelings. I would argue we've been coddling them. And our kids are no happier. They're no more well-adjusted. In fact, they are suffering from higher rates of anxiety, stress, suicidal ideation, and depression, and gender confusion than 20 years ago when I was teaching. We have made things worse, not better. So I know I've painted a pretty bleak picture, and the situation is rough. There are times when I feel very discouraged, but I want you to know there's hope. I'm looking out at some of that hope right now. You're here this evening because these are concerns to you. But I want to just close out with sharing just a little encouragement with you. What I go to and hold on to when I feel discouraged. A few years ago, I was feeling just the heavy weight of everything that was going on in terms of pushing these radical ideologies and seeing the impact that it had on my students. And you know how sometimes you can feel the darkness and the spiritual warfare. You can just feel it, and that's where I was. It was the beginning of a new school year. I was moved into a new classroom, and I was cleaning this classroom out and getting it ready for the school year, and I was just praying to God, and I was just like, Lord, I cannot do this anymore. It is too hard. It hurts too much. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And I was cleaning off a bookshelf. I found a book tucked on the bottom shelf in the corner, and I picked it up and I dusted it off. And I read the cover, and it said Holy Bible. And I thought, my goodness, what are you doing here? And then I opened it, and the inside cover, it says, presented by the senior class of 1955. This Bible had been a gift to the high school where I teach from the class of 1955. It's probably one of a set that they gave as their senior class gift. And like many of you, my first thought went straight to cynicism, right? Oh my gosh, look at how far we've fallen. You'd never see anything like this today. But I am telling you that the Lord got a hold of my heart immediately. And he said, Monica, I did not give you this gift for you to judge this place. I gave you this gift so that you would know I have not abandoned this place. And I have placed you here. Thank you. I've placed you here for such a time as this. Famous evangelist Gill says, your mission field is right between your 2 feet. And he said, stay. Be my salt and be my light. And so I stay. And I'm telling you, the Lord has not abandoned me. He has not abandoned our children. He has not abandoned our public schools. We have been trying to push him out of the public sector for decades, but he is still there, and he is waiting for teachers like me and parents like you and members of the community and grandparents to stand up and say, this is the way, this is the truth, walk in it. Thank you for having me.